In the month of January, I read some of my favorite books of all time and some books that were just a good time. This will be my first monthly reading wrap-up that I post on YouTube, so this will be fun. I want to get you guys more involved with the books that I'm currently reading. It is finally time to post consistently on YouTube 2026. If you don't know, I read pretty much every genre. This month it was a mix of lit fic, classics, and fantasy. So let's talk about the book that I started the year off with. For some reason I forgot that I read The Road by Cormac McCarthy, so let's start with this. First we gotta rewind to late 2024? Yeah, I think it was November, December of 2024. I picked this up, I tried to read it. This was before I was even like a big reader. And I liked the plot of this book. I liked the setting, I liked where we were going. I'm a sucker for post-apocalyptic, my goodness, I tried to say that like 3 times. Books. My favorite show of all time is The Walking Dead. It's also my favorite comic book of all time. As you can see, I have the first omnibus over there. So I like post-apocalyptic, but man, I could not get into McCarthy's writing style. Keep in mind, I had read like 5 books in my life at this point. So I soft DNF'd it. I was like, I can't do this. Maybe I'd come back to it eventually. And a little over a year later, about 60 books later, I ended up loving it. I gave it 5 stars. Isn't that funny? I think in one of my previous videos, I literally said, I'm DNFing The Road, or I DNF'd it. I talked about it. I feel like this is a lesson on sometimes you're not in the right mood to read a book. It's not the right year, and you just gotta leave it on the shelf for when you're ready. And I was ready. McCarthy's style is fantastic. Once I got past that, I was stubborn. I didn't like the lack of quotation marks, which is stupid, but also not stupid. I feel like that's a big difference between most other books. It's also why I'm scared of normal people, but now I'm not. I'm not scared anymore. I want to read normal people now for some reason after reading this. McCarthy's style is also super bleak. He throws you into the book. There's no explaining. It is pretty much all conversation. Let me tell you what the book is. The Road is about a man and his son in the apocalypse. And they're traveling along the road. They are trying to survive. That is the whole book. It's dark. There's some brutal stuff that happens, some dark moments. Had me tearing up a few times. But in all of this hopelessness, this despair, there's an underlying theme of hope, right? Where in this world, it didn't matter how bad it got for this father, he kept going and he kept motivating his son to keep going. And in the end, it's really a message about hope in strange, peculiar circumstances. So I found this comforting. At the same time, it was very uncomfortable. I don't think I'd ever read this again because I cried and it's just brutal. But it's one of the best standalones I've ever read. I love McCarthy's style so much that I want to read Blood Meridian soon, but I've heard No Country for Old Men might be a better place to hit. I don't know, but people say Blood Meridian is his best book. So maybe I want to keep off on that, but it also makes me want to read it. So if anybody is a McCarthy fan, let me know where I should go from here, because I love this. So let's talk about the book that I started the year off with. That was The Bone Ships by R.J. Barker. This is book 1 in the Tide Child trilogy. In my opinion, one of the most underrated fantasy trilogies. I know I've only read book 1, but still people don't talk about it enough. And I've heard each book gets better than the last. I own book 2. My goodness. So I'm excited to read that, but this series kind of reminds me of Pirates of the Caribbean almost, where in this world it's a bunch of pirates, it's a seafaring world, it's a bunch of islands, and they make their ships out of dragon bones, or that's the most sturdy material. There's a bunch of different materials they make ships out of, all the way down from like leaves to dragon bones. But in this world, dragons have not been around for 100 or so years. I can't remember the exact amount of time, but it's at least like a century. So this material is super rare. And for the first time in this many years, a dragon comes back, or a dragon is found. So it's this political race because warfare is determined by how powerful their ships are. So our main character is on a journey to find this dragon. I did like that journey, but honestly, this first book, my favorite part was just the characters and the atmosphere of it. I don't think I've ever seen a fantasy book where it's really feeling like you're on the crew. Like obviously there's books I've read where you feel like you're part of the gang. This one, you feel like you are actually a pirate. Like because the lingo is so distinct and it has this feel to it where you are a pirate. And then the small little world building details that R.J. Barker includes. What I also like about this is our main character is not this boisterous, overpowered person. Jordan Twiner, our main character, is almost like a Tyrion Lannister. I'm not going to say anything about his backstory, but he is not overpowered and I love it. Started off the year strong with The Bone Ships. I love this book. Then I started my Russian classics journey with Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. And I loved it. It is now in my top 3, probably my second favorite book of all time. And I'm sure as I read more classics, I just started getting into them a few months ago. A lot of them I'm going to end up in my top 5. But I'm just starting, so I feel like immediately I loved Dostoevsky's flowy, almost rant style writing, to where you'll have whole paragraphs that are just almost a chapter long, one person just talking. Or even if it's just the narrator. And I get so addicted to it. It's like I'm in a trance and I don't want to stop without finishing a chapter. The way that Dostoevsky describes a scene or a character's feelings to where they are just overthinking. I mean, his characters are just overthinking final boss. In this book, we follow Raskolnikov or Raja or Rodion. It was so funny. I had to keep maps of all the character names because they all have like 3 different names. And I know that's a thing in Russian literature. And I've heard it's the same with French literature. But Raskolnikov is kind of like this Robin Hood type character, to where he thinks that if one bad deed helps a bunch of people out, it's worth it. Obviously a little bit of a messy idealism there, but it creates for this fascinating story where do we see if the crime and the punishment align. If you can get your hands on the audiobook for this, I really think it's worth it. Not only because it'll help you understand it easier if you're new to Russian classics, but the narrator is just incredible. For an overthinking main character, having a great narrator is so nice. It sets the scene so well. I immersive read this where I was listening to it and reading at the same time, and it's one of the best experiences, not just reading, but just in media in general. I was so immersed in this. Back to the story though, this is almost like a cat and mouse game with our main character, with the police. It is literally just the story of an overthinking, idealistic, messed up Batman. And yes, you can quote me on that. It was also nice like reading this during the winter time, although I'm in Florida, so it was warm out. But like, this is a perfect time to pick this up. It's cold out. This is time for the Russian classics, a 500, 600 page Russian classic. If you're a fan of true crime, I think this is kind of a perfect equivalent to read in fiction. I'm loving my Russian classics journey so far. This was so good. I think Notes from the Underground is the next Dostoevsky I'm going to read. Also, if you're into Russian classics or Dostoevsky, I'm recording a video all year. I'm planning to read The Brothers Karamazov by December. So December, January, I'll have a video out of my journey through Dostoevsky books. And we started off with Crime and Punishment. And it was a bang. All right, the third book that I read was Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. Man, Bradbury was way ahead of his time with this book. Not only with the censorship, which is a huge thing going on these days, but what a lot of people told me when I posted about this, mass streaming media. And it was apparent with all the advanced technology in this world, all the big screens that were on our main character's house. It's kind of a lesson to slow down and not rely on fast-moving media for everything, or else we're just cooked. If you didn't have to read this in school, like a lot of us did, this was technically a reread, but I forgot most of it because I read this in my sophomore year of high school. And I'm so glad we did because I just remember loving it. It's only 150 pages. You can get through it in a day, if not 2 days. This is a speculative fiction dystopian book set in a world where books are banned. The government wants to control everything that is being produced literature-wise, so people aren't allowed to have books. And our main character works for this fire station to where they go around. It's the opposite of instead of taking out fires, or instead of putting out fires, they create fires and they burn these houses and these libraries down that they find. But obviously it wouldn't be engaging if our main character didn't have crisis on what he believed, what is right, and discovering books. Anybody that appreciates literature should read this book just to get into a world where we wouldn't be able to own bookshelves like this. My short review that I put on Fable was, I'll put it on the screen, it was about if somebody burned my Penguin Classics collection, I would turn into John Wick. And I really would. If I got sent a lot of these, and I'm so grateful. If these got burnt, I would be upset. Any of these, but you know, the Penguin Classics are special. I think everybody needs to read this nowadays, especially today. Fantastic book. And I hope they're still teaching it in school like they were, man, I'm getting old. 7 years ago? Ooh, I'm aging myself. All right, this next book is something I have never seen anybody talk about. I looked it up and it was mentioned in like 1 or 2 videos on Instagram. Maybe I didn't look hard enough, but this was a lit fic novel kind of out of my comfort zone. We read Fire Exit by Morgan Talty. This is set on a Native American Indian indigenous reservation in Maine. And this is kind of my look into Native American culture. So I'm glad I read it for that reason, because it was fascinating. But it follows our main character, Charles. And Charles, he is white, but his stepfather was Native American. So he was kind of indoctrined into this culture. And on this reservation, he fell in love with a Native American girl. But in their culture, they don't like interracial relationships, but even more so, interracial children. So when Charles and Mary have a child, Mary's like, yeah, nah, we can't do this. Nobody can know that you're the father. Charles lives his whole life actually living across the river, like right across the river from Mary and Elizabeth, his daughter. But nobody knows that it's his daughter. And eventually he's saying, I want people to know. Like, he can't keep living like this. So that's what this story is about. It's him coming to terms with that reality and wanting to change that reality. It's just a beautiful story about Native American culture and what goes into that, especially as our main character is white. It's not just that, though, because it has other characters that they go into the backstories for. That's kind of only half of it. I really felt emotional reading this at times, and I was tearing up at certain points just because it was just a beautiful story. I feel like everybody needs to read this. I'm not sure how it's not more popular. I picked this up randomly. I was actually attempting to do a 48-hour readathon, and it did not work because I can't read that much in 2 days. I got burnt out, but not out of this book. I picked it up randomly at Barnes & Noble for the challenge and ended up loving it. So I wish more people would read this. I hope you do if you see this. All right, book 5. Book 5 is actually the 3rd book in one of the most popular fantasy series of all time. That series is The Wheel of Time. I read The Dragon Reborn by Robert Jordan. My main takeaway is that I think The Wheel of Time is now my favorite fantasy series of all time. I think there are others that I've read that I consider better, but I think this is my favorite for sure. It's like a second home. It's warming. The best way I can describe it is an adult fairy tale that doesn't feel cliche. Like, there's so many famous tropes that are seen everywhere in fantasy or just in tales, but it's done so well. Robert Jordan is one of the best fantasy writers. It doesn't feel monotonous like you've seen it before, even though you have. If you don't know what The Wheel of Time is, it basically follows Rand al'Thor and all of his friends and people from this small village. He's a farm boy. Come to find out, he has these powers. Nobody knows where they came from, at least at the start. And somebody comes to the village basically saying, we gotta go somewhere, we gotta get out of here. The person that comes is somebody with powers. It's so hard to describe this without spoiling it. But the main villain, the main point of this is there is the Dark One, or Baalzamon. He has been sealed away by heroes in the past, but really, he's not sealed away fully. Each book he kind of gets sealed less and less. But this has some of the best fight scenes in fantasy. One of them in this book felt like a Star Wars scene. It was so cool. Like, I could imagine they were just on some planet fighting with lightsabers. And that's all I'm gonna say. This was a 5-star. This is the best book in the series yet. And I've heard it's basically a prologue for this book, book 4, The Shadow Rising. Also, if you're wondering why the editions are different, this is the old mass market paperback. I'm collecting all of these, but also these because, I don't know, I want both. This is easier to read out of. This is more for collection. I think I have a picture of all my collection of these. I'll put it up on the screen. But book 3 was the best so far, and I love this so much. I'm so excited to read book 4. I've heard book 4 to 6 is the best run in any fantasy series ever, so I'm hyped for that. The Dragon Reborn, a fantastic fantasy book. And I was kind of not feeling fantasy for a bit. You noticed I wasn't reading fantasy for a few weeks. Got back into it with this, and now I'm reinvigorated to get back into the genre. Finally, I read what is now my favorite book of all time, and I consider it the greatest book I've ever read, which go hand in hand, but not really. But it is both. That was East of Eden by John Steinbeck. I feel like most people have heard of this book. It's one of the most transcendent novels in American history. I know a lot of people consider this the greatest novel in American history. It's either that or Lonesome Dove, which I am reading soon as my Libby hold comes in for the audiobook, because I've heard the audiobook is fantastic for this. I'm going to immersive read it. I'm curious to see which one I like better, because a lot of people compare these two. But man, this book changed my life. It taught me so many lessons, and everybody was telling me, dude, it's going to change your life before I even read it. I did not believe them. I don't know if you've heard that about this book or any book, and you're like, there's no way, right? There's no way that it can just change your whole outlook on life. But this book did that, along with it just being a fantastic story. We follow a couple families, and we see what family trauma does, handed down to their children through the generations. So in this book, it spans over decades, and we follow a couple families. I am not a religious person, but it follows the Cain and Abel story, if you're familiar with that. It's a retelling of Cain and Abel. Steinbeck really just dissects what it means to be good or evil, and he shows it's not black or white. There's no certain metric that you can define good and evil. We have different characters that you think are evil, and they are evil, or you think they are, and then you realize they might not be. Or you can see how somebody may think they're not. These are the most dynamic characters in fiction, and it is brutal. There are brutal themes in this. It's not a hard read, it's not hard to digest in that it's uncomfortable. But man, there's some evil people in this book. And Steinbeck makes you think, can people change? Can people go off the path that was destined to them through their parents? Is it nature or is it nurture? And it honestly depends on the person in this book. That's the whole point of this, is we don't know. It's not black or white. It's not a definite thing. The other main takeaway is this word timshel, which is a Hebrew translation from the Bible, and it means thou mayest. It's kind of funny. I've heard his translation is actually wrong. It doesn't mean thou mayest, but I don't know. Somebody let me down in the comments if somebody knows the full story on that. No matter what, you have a choice, because no matter how much you want people to do things for you or tell you what to do, you ultimately have to be the person to get up and do that. And a lot of these characters in this book, that is the notion that they go off of. And this word is genuinely going to change my life. I kind of want to get it tattooed at some point. I don't know where, or it's just one word. It's just timshel, so it could be anywhere. Just as a reminder to take control of your destiny. Do what you need to do. You can have help along the way, obviously. Rely on people, but not fully. Steinbeck is the greatest character writer I've ever read, and to me it's not close. I think the top 3 for me are probably Steinbeck, Dostoevsky, and Robin Hobb. Scratch that, top 4, George R.R. Martin. Those 4 can write characters, but Steinbeck for me is at the top. I'll never forget these characters. This book will change your life. I guarantee it. In some facet, form, it will change your life. I will say there's not a ton of plot. So if you're just a character person, this will work amazing for you. Go into it knowing there's not a ton of plot. I don't need plot though. I'm a big character person. I'll let the author create the plot for me, not the story. We'll go with that. That sounds profound. It's probably not, but what a book. These are all the books that I read in the month of January, the first monthly wrap up of the year. It was a great month. I also started getting into annotating a little bit, so it's been fun just dissecting these books a little more and taking my time with them. Down below, I want to know what books you read in January. What were your favorites? If you've read any of these, how has your reading year started out so far? Because to me, it's been great. If you want to see more in real time updates on these books, go follow my Instagram. I'll put it up on screen, but it's also in my description down below, where I'll be doing these wrap-ups. But if you want to see the individual ones in real time, go check out my Instagram. It's also just where I give most of my updates on anything, because I post about TV shows and anime, manga, stuff like that over there. So if you want to see that, I feel bad. I've been leaving the YouTube behind. 2026 is the year. I promise you. I say that every time. But hey, this is 2 videos in 1 week. We're already off to a good start. Let me know what type of wrap-ups or updates you would want to see. I am reading The Count of Monte Cristo next month. So for those that have read that, would y'all want to see weekly updates on these bigger classics that I'm reading, or just bigger series and books, or just a monthly wrap up in recounting what it was? January was great. I hope yours was too. Consider subscribing if you've enjoyed this or you just enjoy my channel overall. Happy reading, y'all.